From the kitchen of the cabin, a look at the games that made us who we are in Ben and Steve's Advent Calendar.
All right, so here we are on December the... I misplaced my calendar again. The 15th? The 16th. It's the 16th,
It's the
isn't
16th, Steve. God, get a grip. Definitely the 16th, recording this live. This is coming to you live from across the Atlantic.
Live on December the 16th for today's edition of the Advent Calendar that Ben and Steve are doing for the holidays special edition.
But that is the name of it, yeah. I've changed the name now.
And we're staying in the ancient Roman world from yesterday when we talked about Concordia, and also I think in the realm of like really clever mechanisms that we love. Although I didn't realize that you were going to be talking about this game at this time. I just noticed it on the list, and I was going to make a joke about Trojans, but I can't even make a joke because the game that you picked is just so mind-blowingly good. And
it's very arch, this game, isn't it?
You know
what I mean, Steve? You know what I mean?
I was going to say, I just want to get into it, Ben. Why did you pick Trajan?
So I played this first time, and I played it again, in my infancy of board gaming. I bought it because I'd heard it talked about in the sort of board game sphere. And then I saw the cover, and I thought the cover was really cool. So I bought it. And I played it the first time, and I wrote something about this. And I played it with some computer programmers, and I likened my performance to a Vietnamese pot-bellied pig being on a track with 3 greyhounds. And they ran around the score track quicker than I could imagine, and I was galumphing behind. And after that play of it, I didn't play it for another 2 years. It just sat on my shelf as this telltale heart-esque reminder of my own stupidity, right?
Nice,
and then
nice. Only on this podcast.
Indeedy do. And then I got it out again. And the game. Stevie!
On fire!
And I played it, and I realised because I'd developed so much more as a gamer over the time before I played it again, that it didn't feel half as heavy as I'd remembered it. The rules didn't seem half as cumbersome as I'd remembered them. And, even though I wasn't much better at it, I realised how meticulously designed this game is, how that central engine of moving the stones around the bowls then fires out onto the board and creates these wonderful happenings. And it is so this, to some extent, I think rather contradicts a lot that I say about gaming. I think this is a Skinner box to a large degree. I think Stefan Feld makes brilliant Skinner boxes that just deliver points every round and just give you those little endorphin hits that make you want to continue playing, right?
So what is it about Stefan Feld, and what is it about this particular entry in his oeuvre specifically?
So I love Stefan Feld games. There are other games of his, like La Isla, I think is great. It's a lot lighter than this, but I think is really, really good. I think Carpe Diem is great. I think Amerigo is great. But this one, this is my second favourite, and I've chosen this because of its place in my gaming history, rather than that it's my favourite Feld. My favourite Feld is Castles of Burgundy, which I think is a real work of genius. But this one it's sort of archetypal Feld, right? There's lots of ways to score points, but it's all centered around this really beautifully efficient and clever central engine of the game that propels it forward. Those moving the stones around the bowls is tactile, which is part of gaming. It is cerebral, which is part of gaming. And what's so good about it is it's challenging. Yes, the game is a Skinner box, but you have to be the pigeon that goes around in a circle to get the seed. You don't just get the seed, right?
I think it's probably a fair critique of a game to say that it's just a Skinner box. But if Stefan Feld's games could be accused of being like Skinner boxy or like point salad, well, he just does it better than everybody else. I mean, the guy does do this sort of painting with mechanisms. Castles of Burgundy has the dice, and Trajan has the Mancala, and I think that's what does it for me. Like I agree with you. I think I'd probably prefer Castles of Burgundy, but if I were going to pick one of the two to talk about for this series, I still would have picked Trajan just for that reason. And we haven't even talked about the Mancala. Why does that make the game fun?
Well, because so a couple of reasons, right? So firstly, this game is to a large degree multiplayer solitaire. And people rail against multiplayer solitaire, but I think multiplayer solitaire can be wonderful, especially if you play with our game group, where AP can be a thing. The beautiful thing about the Mancala is you can just plan your turn pretty much perfectly while everyone else is taking theirs. Which means if you have an AP heavy group, then, you know, that cuts down the AP a bit. Not completely, but it cuts it down. And that Mancala it's not just finding out where to drop your last stone, but it's also apportioning the colours so you fire off those bonus tiles which give you things. And kind of, this is nothing in this game feels like an empty turn, right? Everything has been focused in to offer maximum sort of reaction to what you do. And that is brilliantly clever.
Yeah, and there's a kind of agency that goes along with it. So if I compare it to the Rondel is, I don't know, like participatory. There's not always like a blocking thing involved. Everybody's on the same Rondel, but like my Mancala is mine, right? It's my Mancala, and I get to. I mean, if I do well, if I do poorly, it's all on me. It's all like it's my fault if I don't optimize that thing, and it's really hard to do actually. But there's always something that you can do, and just when you get frustrated because you can't do the thing that you thought last turn was going to be your brilliant next move, boom, you figure something else out. I'm like, oh, I'll do that instead. That's even better. It gives you that opportunity.
And, you know, people talk about competitors as other people, but often it can be incredibly satisfying that your main competitor is your own ineptitude and overcoming your own sort of cognitive problems to get through this puzzle and solve it yourself. That's really satisfying too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's totally a puzzle. And to the extent that it's a puzzle, I'm wondering what you would say to the potential critique that this game, like some Stefan Feld games, is just like too much, right? Too many things to keep track of. I mean, is it just that you have to focus on one area of the board, whether it's like the map area on top or the forum or whatever it is, or the shipping part? I mean, it's just there are so many options, and it seems like figuring out that path can be very difficult. And
well, that's the point. That's why the game is rewarding.
It's the opposite. Right? It's like the opposite of Mac Garrett's in a way.
Right, and that's why the game is rewarding, because it offers you many paths and you need to maximize those paths. And people may say, well, if you're just, you know, playing against yourself, why not play a solo game? Well, very simply, because sitting around a table with people is great, right? This is why we get into games, I think. And we can get sort of carried away with focusing on aspects of gaming mechanisms because they are the way that the games show themselves to the world. But fundamentally, it's about sitting around a table with people, and Trajan is a great time around the table with people, right?
Yeah, and just on this topic, I keep hearing about like statistics that show that there's been a decline in like friendships in the world, particularly among men, particularly among older men. Like the average number of friendships for like millennials is like 0 or something like that. That there are these like joke skits about it. Like if you Google for SNL Man Park, it's this idea that there's like a special, like, you know, you can bring dogs to a dog run. It's like a special park where you can bring men to meet each other because they don't have any friends. And it's like a very funny skit, but it's like a real phenomenon in the world. This whole like bowling alone thing where people are becoming more and more isolated. Obviously, COVID didn't help. You sometimes bring up how consumer culture kind of wants to drive a wedge into human relationships, because the more time you spend with other people, which is just about the most rewarding thing that you can do, the less time you're spending trying to fill that hole with just like stuff and accumulation.
Yeah, the bigger the hole, the more consumer durables you can stick in it, right?
Yeah, and I just can't help feeling this way about the kind of rise of the solo game mode. I mean, I think it's a bit sad. I'm going to get a lot of shit for this. Whatever. I think it's just about the only thing that it's good for, maybe, is learning how to play the game on your own. But I still don't even feel like doing that. I really think it's worth leaning into the social aspect of games. I mean, obviously, if you can, if you have the opportunity. But like the board game as a social experience, it's just like it's an invitation to do this. And especially for those of us, I include myself, who might be a bit more socially awkward. The game provides like this sort of like focus for attention and distraction.
Safety net, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And we should be celebrating this more, especially as it seems to become prevalent in board gaming to turn them into just like the analog equivalent of video games, which like many of which are like single player experiences. Not all, but even when you're multiplayer, you're still kind of alone, right?
And I rail often against, the blinging of games. But as with everything, I'm a fucking hypocrite. And you bought me the Geek Up bits from Board Game Geek for this game. And it just improved it tenfold and makes me want to play it even more. And it reminded me, even though I rail against it, there is a tactility inherent in games, right? And it's something about, I think, engaging more than one sense at the same time that kind of harkens back to a core humanity, right? Without getting overly pretentious.
Yeah, and there's a difference between driving a Lamborghini and putting a spoiler on your Honda.
Right.
So, getting back to Trajan, why would you recommend that? And this is not like a new game either, right? It's like becoming venerable. Why would you recommend that people play this game if they haven't tried it before?
Because it is the sort of, I think, slap bang in the middle of the golden age of gaming. It feels, even though the Mancala is something that's been around for a long, long time, hundreds of years at least, it feels fresh and new, and like great works of art, great sort of groundbreaking works, it never tarnishes. And there's something of just fresh and invigorating about Trajan today as the day it first came out. Thank you for listening to this show and indulging our overweening nostalgia. If you would like to support the show, you can do that by going to patreon.com/5G4D. And we both wish you a very Merry Christmas.